Chapter 6, Dig Deeper. Even though we hear a lot about reading readiness and readiness for school, children are really born competent and ready to learn. They do not have to be readied. They actually begin learning before they're born. What we want to do in the learning process in order to facilitate and support their inborn tendencies, we want to draw on their individual strengths and competencies to help us facilitate and support their learning. Observe their self-initiated pursuits, so when they play, when they get ideas, when they carry those ideas out, and offer opportunities for them to dig deeper. Notice how children communicate their learning, and they may do it in different ways, spoken, through play, through dance, through art, and then expand on that. They use play, they use song, they pretend, they create, and they construct. Observe the children's unfolding development. Really pay close attention to what's going on. Respect the level of development each child is at. Look at each one individually and really pay close attention to what they're doing and what that might reflect in regards to development. And then facilitate and support the development process. And take a look at the information in Chapter 6, found on page 140, for some interesting examples for each of these items. So Erik Erikson, in his social emotionally focused theory, tells us that adults facilitate and support the development and learning of children by how they meet their needs. And so in the first stage, which happens in infancy, we facilitate and support infants in developing trust. And we don't want them to end up at the end of this stage in a state of mistrust. When infants cry, it means they need something. And our job as an adult is to discern the reason for their distress. Are they hungry? Are they in pain? Are they uncomfortable? Or do they need something interesting to do? For toddlers, the positive outcome in their stage is autonomy or independence. Toddlers need to feel like they're able to do things on their own. And what we need to do as adults is to facilitate and support them in accomplishing this by allowing them to complete tasks that they can be successful in. And if we're always doing things for them and always making decisions for them, then they end up in a state of shame and doubt about their abilities. For preschoolers, we want to facilitate and support them in taking initiative. They need to be able to initiate their own creative projects, their own play, and adults must facilitate and support their efforts while introducing them to the ideas on how their projects influence other people. And finally, for school-age children, children need to feel success in tasks that elementary schools set for them, and that the positive outcome there is industry. Adults must facilitate and support their efforts by organizing the tasks into segments where they can utilize the social and emotional skills they have developed to trust adults, be independent, and to initiate industrious projects that assist them in accomplishing the necessary tasks required to help them feel industrious. So these are ways that we can facilitate and support children as they grow and develop. So Principle 1 in your textbook then says to challenge children to go further. So pay attention and honor what they're exploring on their own, and then look closely for opportunities to support them in the next step of development. And take a look at the story called Open Doors on page 141 for an excellent example of that principle. Principle 2, help children to represent ideas with multiple materials. Provide opportunities for children to use many mediums and materials, like allow them to draw, to paint, to dance, to create music, and then present tasks in many different ways. Practice different kinds of skills, and then recognize different aspects of ideas. So take a look on page 144 for the example of facial relations. Principle 3 is tap into children's love of song and music. And take a look at the story about Tom Hunter's song, Enticing Fred, on page 150. And if you want to, I would encourage you to look up this song on Amazon or on iTunes and take a listen to it. Principle 4, draw on children's fascination with drama and magical thinking. So make-believe play or pretend play helps children make sense of the world. It's how they problem solve. It's how they sort out what happens to them in real life. And remember that animism is part of Piaget's pre-operational thought stage. And really, for preschool children, they are really good at pretending and participating in make-believe and reenactment, and coming up with roles and acting those roles out and planning. And you can see this on page 154 in the story Rat Habitats. Principle 5, harness the drive to use their bodies. Movement not only builds bodies, but also builds minds. And remember, Piaget's first stage of cognitive development is sensory motor thought, which comes just before pre-operational, and that's using their senses and moving their bodies to find out about the world around them. And remember, that's all about cognitive development, and so even though they're in pre-operational thought, they're very skilled at using their senses and their bodies to explore and discover. Principle 6, build on children's attention to the natural world. And on page 160 of your book, again, there's a story about millions of pods and ways that you could, that the staff in those stories built on the children's interest in those pods in their outdoor environment. Principle 7, explore the children's theories. On page 168, there's an example of an exploration by children of how phones work. And actually, in your assignment, you're going to be coming up with your own ideas about how things work. And principle 8, reflect children's ideas back in documentation. So remind children of themselves as learners, as we've talked about before, and things they've discovered and wonderful ideas they've come up with, and you can see some examples of that documentation on page 170.